Could you tell me a little bit about tribalism? It's almost same as populism, but why you call it tribalism?
Well, I have the feeling that populism is too positive a word for what we are trying to talk about. In fact, populism, if you look at the word itself, it would mean addressing the needs and the concerns of the people in general. And I don't think that what we call populism is really about the needs and concern of the people in general. They are, on the contrary, about fragmenting people into narrow nationalism, ethno-nationalism, defending, for example, Europe. And when they say defending Europe, what they have in mind is not the open Europe of values, universal values. They have the sense of a white Europe. And that is the reason why I call it tribalism rather than populism.
So you see that the people are being fragmented at the moment?
I think so. I think there is a crisis of the very notion of humanity in general. We need to reconnect with the idea of humanity in general, which is not easy because humanity in general seems an abstraction. I can see people who are close to me, but I don't see humanity. But at the same time, humanity has an ethical value because it is in the name of humanity that we can have shared values and that we can be hospitable and open to human disarray and misery.
I can understand that it's not an easy task to reunify people.
It is not easy.
How can we?
That is why I in my presentation, I talked so much about the fact that, yes, indeed, our instinct goes toward people who are close to us. So going beyond instinct and reaching what makes us profoundly human, that is to say, our reason, and also religion. And this is why I talked also about religion as actually carrying those universal values that my neighbor, to use the religious language, may not be actually my physical neighbor, but someone living at the other end of the earth, just because that other person is suffering.
In the Christian context, it is something that's called charity, and there are similar ideas in different traditions, I guess?
Indeed, and that is why, in that sense, you do have the shared value of humanity in religions, in charity in Christianity, obviously, and as we see now, the current Pope Francis, is really talking on behalf of that notion of charity. This is why he is fighting so hard for the principle of hospitality to migrants. But you find the same thing in other religions as well. And I think that the beauty of religion can be problems. We have enough examples to see that in our world today. But at the same time, we have to look at religion as the foundation of this very idea that what is called my neighbor can be someone different.
I think we can learn lessons from history. I was not a good history student, but I think there was some cases like Ottoman Turkey. The Muslims accepted people from other traditions with hospitality. Am I right?
Exactly. And they were actually applying the principle of their own religion, openness to people from other nationalities who could be ruled by their own law within the broader community. And this is why we have to look at religion in its two different meanings. One is the vertical relationship between the individual and God, and the other one is the organization of a community of believers and also of non-believers. How do you treat the non-believer? How much pluralism and openness do you have in your founding principles? That is a very important question for religions today, to answer.
Pluralism and openness.
Exactly, and drawing lessons from history, as you have just done, is important in that case.
The other important topic is the environment. Obviously, we see a crisis in this area as well. What can we learn from history?
Well, first, the first lesson I believe we learn is precisely what connects the two aspects of our discussion, which is that a sense of our common humanity is given to us by the crisis of the environment. We can see that this is a crisis that no single part of the world can solve, because it is not about regions, it is about our globe in its totality.
We're all connected.
We are all connected. So we have here an example of connection and why we need the general idea of humanity. And the lesson also from history is that this respect for the environment, the sense that we are responsible for it, is not something new. And we have, and that is what our own humanistic disciplines should be teaching us to do, we have to give to that notion the historical depth that it should have. This is the reason why I looked at this old 12th century text by a philosopher from Andalusia, which is really about the responsibility of the human being vis-a-vis environment. And for example, if we want to turn this into curriculum and teaching, this would be definitely a text that we want to put in an anthology. Let's say that we try to design an anthology of texts from all different cultures and languages and traditions about the human sense of responsibility vis-a-vis nature. This would be a tremendous tool for teaching responsibility and responsible behavior vis-a-vis environment to the younger generation.
So this kind of education based on historical evidence
Yes.
Will provide a new generation to learn why the environment is important, and that will give us the ground. So that's what you say.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. And for example, teaching young Muslims about this text by this philosopher from Andalusia, who actually drew from the religious text of Quran the implication of the notion of what it means to be human.
So in Quran there's some reasoning behind why we need to protect the environment?
Exactly, because the status of the human being is to be the representative of God in his creation, as if God had called the human being to collaboration with the work of his creation. That means that we are responsible for it, and that defines the stewardship of the human being vis-a-vis nature.
In your keynote session, I think we heard a very interesting comment from the floor about language. In different languages, different concepts are expressed in different ways.
Exactly, and I was very happy about that intervention, because yes, we have to acknowledge the difference of languages, and which could create some misunderstanding. But at the same time, we have to believe, and that was my answer to the very interesting question that was posed from the floor, we have to also believe in translation. That is the capacity to understand each other beyond the difference of our languages, and to discover that we do share fundamental values.
You talked about learning from the past, but we are projecting ourselves to the future. Could you talk a little bit about this as well, please?
Yes, actually this was prompted by also another very important, interesting intervention from the floor. What I wanted to illustrate is that we have to have this kind of prospective thinking, understanding that the actions that we have to take tomorrow are not just dictated by our past or our tradition, that we are not just following our tradition and being pushed by it from in the back, so to say, but we pose the actions that we pose today in connection with the future that we imagine and project. And that is very important because this is the kind of thinking, for example, that will easily translate into actions for the environment. People who are very skeptical about climate change today.
Some people are, yes.
Some people are. Unfortunately, people who are deciders. That is the unfortunate. If I were a skeptic, that would not matter. But if the president of a very powerful country is, unfortunately, that does matter. But because they say, well, we don't see it, or we don't see the responsibility of the human being, and so on and so forth. But science is saying something different, because science is about looking at the trends and seeing what is going to happen if we do not act. So acting and having an eye with a focus on the future. This is the best example of what it means to consider the importance of future time, although future is not here yet, for our actions, the actions that we take today.
Professor D, thank you very much indeed.
It's been a pleasure.